Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Rev Genius LinkedIn Live. My name is Justin Levy. I'm the Director of Social and Influencer Marketing at Demandbase. And today I am joined by someone wonderful. I'll let her introduce herself.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. It's Katie right here. I am the head of community over at Metadata, and I'm so excited for our discussion today. So thank you, Justin and Rev Genius, for having me be a part of it.
So today we're going to talk about community-led growth versus product-led growth, right? And in our conversations on the side, community-led growth is the next big thing, or you want to talk about that. How would you, besides what it says in its terms, how would you define community-led growth versus product-led growth? Is it community type? Is it the kind of go-to-market motion of it? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think it's just really important to kind of define PLG versus CLG. And I think with product-led growth, it's really about how people are using the product and what the user experience is like in order for them to continue acquiring new users, getting those retention rates high, and really getting customers to renew and upsell. I think that's one of the biggest things with product-led growth. Community-led growth, and I think there's still a lot that can be really defined by it, and there's still so much gray area because a lot of it's also dependent on how you think of community to start off with. But for me, I think a big C community, so community as a business, community-led growth is really focused on little C community, so relationships, and building and nurturing those strong relationships that are eventually going to lead directly to how the pipeline's being influenced. And I think that there's some really interesting areas with that as well that deal with this alleged dark social, which if you guys know me, I just call it word of mouth, but apparently to stay relevant, you have to use the buzz term. So dark social, but really community-led growth is from word of mouth or dark social and referrals. And there's obviously a lot of other aspects to it, but I'll leave it at that.
Now, you mentioned communities, and obviously the uprise or the uptick is in private communities, just like Rev Genius being hosted or live kind of within Slack, and we know Discord and all of these other ones. So when you look at the kind of CLG side of it, community-led growth, do you see that, or do you believe that there should be different communities for each one of these? So what I mean by that is, if you still want that kind of straight PLG motion, right? Would you have a product community, and would you have a customer community? Because a customer community is what that means versus community that has, in a sense, nothing to do with your customers, right? Like at Demandbase, we have a community that we power, but it's not a demand-based product or customer community. You see what I mean?
No, I absolutely do. And those of you that know, I started out working at Sales Hacker. And so the Sales Hacker community is really geared towards an industry of encouraging and motivating and driving sellers to create this new revolution of how sales should be done versus the traditional little black book style of how sales has been done. And so what people forget is that Sales Hacker was powered by outreach. And where I think we did a really good job, and why people forget that is because we kept it brand agnostic. It wasn't push outreach every single time. But as far as keeping it separate, I think it really just plays to what you're trying to accomplish with the community, right? So Salesforce's community, while they do have aspects and areas to help you in whatever role that you're actually in, similar to HubSpot, a lot of it is still geared towards how you can be a better user or practitioner of that product. So I think whenever it comes to organizations who are trying to figure out what type of community they should have, a lot of it's really going to be based off what goals you have. I also think as you're considering product-led growth and community-led growth, you also have to consider, like, if we're going down product-led growth, like you said, is it a community for practitioners? And if so, I would almost argue that you shouldn't have a separate community for your product and a separate community for your users. I think that that's just a lot of work that shouldn't be there. I think whenever it comes to product-led growth in a product-focused community, that's really a customer success community, right? Because the product-led growth is all about how we're enabling our customers to better use all the functionalities of the products, and then eventually lead to a community-led growth aspect of that model of referrals and bringing in new business. Then you really need to be enabling your customers and educating them. And so I think when you look at product-led growth, community does have a supporting role of that motion. And it's through education, enablement, and networking whenever you think about it. So it's a little different, but it's really dependent on what that company is wanting to accomplish, which nobody likes that answer. Because it's like, well, that doesn't help us.
Absolutely. And because I forget to mention this at the start of every LinkedIn Live, if you have questions, Vanessa from Rev Genius is monitoring them for us, and she'll send them to us for us to be able to answer throughout the live. But what you mentioned is really key, I think, right? So at Demandbase, we have a customer community, and that's different than, like you said, Sales Hacker was for you. Ours is called Revenue Circle, but our our customer community is where we do have our product team engaged, our product marketers and things of that nature. The community is far beyond that. You know, it's for customers to interact, for our customer community manager to be in there and work with them on different things. But certainly, when we have product feature updates, or someone has a question actually about the product, they're in there to be able to provide that feedback. And I think that what helps within that is now it's available for everyone to see, right? If that's where your strategy is focused, to grow this community, this customer community, and someone has a question about the product, now you're getting an answer directly from our company's product marketer, and it's available for everyone to see. Now, I'm curious, in your role now, do you oversee a private community that the company runs, or is it more geared towards a customer community or something of that nature?
Absolutely. Yeah. So as a head of community at Metadata, I am completely responsible for the success and or failures. You gotta take the good with the bad sometimes of the demand community. The demand community has over 1,000 B2B demand gen marketers. We've also got a bunch of CMOs, VPs, and heads in there as well. And it is purely to help demand gen marketers with kind of wherever they're at. And it's been amazing. It is private in the sense that you do have to apply. Even this morning, I had an AE apply, and I felt so bad because I never want to say no or turn people away. But I was like, I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to have a salesperson in here that's not a marketer. So you can't be in here, because I want to keep it, we've all been in communities where we've been spammed. So I want to keep it away from that. We do have a customer channel for customers that are a part of the community, because they are B2B demand gen marketers that use our product. And so ideally the questions about features, functionalities, a lot of that does happen in our customer channel. But it's been interesting because a lot of times those questions get put in other channels as well, because they deal with what people are already dealing with. So one thing that's really important to us, though, is to keep those responses fairly brand agnostic, meaning I want a B2B demand gen marketer to come in and see that question and still get some value out of it, whether they have our tool or not. Ideally, those customer questions are going to be in our customer channel. Like you said, it's a place where people can always see the answers. It's going to help reduce our support ticket times, and so much more. And it's going to help with education and enablement. But when it does slip out into other channels. And if it's something that's a little bit more generic and it has a little bit of metadata in it, then I'll usually leave it. There's been some I've had to police and be like, hey, it goes here. But the community is really for anyone in B2B demand gen that's just wanting to get better and connect. So it's a fairly open, like I said, we just don't let sellers in. Just the sanctity of it all.
The big question comes from this, right? And I do the same thing from, one of the many hats that I wear is, like I said, managing this community called Revenue Circle. That again, it's powered by us, right? It's not a community for Demandbase per se. Now, a big question that comes up for anyone that is in a community management role is how do you, especially one that's not about the brand, how do you manage that, the metrics around that? Like, how do you show success back to your bosses and to the company as a whole that this thing that they're paying for, they're paying, you and anything that's needed for the community? How do you prove the success of that?
Yeah, absolutely. One,
the long pause.
Well, it's complicated because a lot of times it's really just dealing on who your managers are, because there's a lot of people in leadership right now that think that they want a community, but they don't want to put the time, money, resources, and effort and support into it. I was just talking with someone about this, and actually Morgan Ingram had messaged me what I think about B2B communities, and I had said oftentimes people want this big community. They want to be the next Salesforce trailblazers and do all this stuff, and that's great. But they don't. But what you need is support, time, resources, you name it. And I said, oftentimes we only get one of the three, if that. So when it comes to proving out whether or not this community is successful, a lot of it actually really depends on what type of work you do ahead of time, right? You don't just put a community together and say, oh, I think this is a good idea. You need to be talking to people that would be a part of this community and getting that level of support or lack of support, depending on if the idea should be tested out or not. And then once you bring that to the table, so it really starts from the very beginning of this inception idea. And so once you take that and you bring it to the table, then you're able to say, okay, so let's figure out from the very beginning of what success looks like. And so for us, we had a very non-traditional start to it, which is actually really fun. And one of the reasons why I love where I'm at and love the metadata team is because we try and take what people are doing and flip it upside down and do things very non-traditionally, which is awesome. And so when it comes to the community and the success, of course, we track engagement and we measure activity and growth. Like, of course, you're always going to track that. But to your question of how do we show what success looks like, I really point to community-led growth. As you're starting, you have to kind of create baselines of stuff. And so that's one of the things is like, you need to make sure that your management understands it takes time, right? You don't just build a baseline off of 3 weeks and try and use that data to project what the future successes are. Because if you use 3 weeks, you're probably doing a lot of promotion at that time. It's not going to be the same as if you took 3 months or 6 months of data and then built projections off of that. So got to have that understanding. But a lot of what we do with community-led growth is whenever I see those conversations, if I see in the customer channel that people are like, oh, I didn't know you could use this tool like this, or it's been fun in some of the introductions, I asked like what tools they're using, and some of the members are like, oh, hopefully metadata. And so I'm able to be like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And then whenever I see in my email, like a win alert of like, oh, they're a part of the metadata family now, this is great. I'm like, wow, I can attribute that to the community because they were not only a member, but they were also part of conversations. And so that's been a really cool thing. But I will say, if you're building a community for the industry, kind of like what we're doing, those things are far and few between sometimes, and it just takes time. The demand community has only been publicly launched since October. And so I don't expect stuff overnight. And I think it's one of those, like, it's going to take a little bit of time to kind of build those baselines. So it's just, I think the better question is like, how do you level set with your leadership on what success could look like and figuring out how to track that type of success without it being like a spammy community, which is eventually going to ruin the relationships that you have with your customers and your members. So.
Absolutely. And I think that the other thing that we see is a lot of, leadership, whether it's in your company or other companies, because it doesn't always have to be within yours, doesn't see that it takes a very long time to build this community, right? It's even if it was a customer only community, but you do this like with what you're doing, you might get an initial pop because everyone from the company helps jump in and promote, we have this great, new shiny thing to come join. And you get some people, that might be influential in your network to share that out. But that's not going to grow to be 10,000 people, 20,000 people, things like that, and a very engaged community.
Yeah.
I've always maintained that I would rather have 500 or 1,000 really engaged people than 50,000 people who are barely engaged, right? And I think and I would love your thoughts. To me, I don't know that always syncs with people, right? That no, we want as many members as possible. To me, if I ask a question in there or someone else, I'd rather see a slew of replies.
Yeah. No, that's something that we've talked a lot about. And that's whenever I was brought on, Jason, my boss, who's awesome, go follow him. Jason, what up? He's the coolest. We sat down, we're like, well, what does success look like? And how do we track this, numbers, all that good stuff. And, I tried to bring what I had learned from other companies, in addition to the folks that I've spoken with who have built other communities in similar industries or organizations like where I'm at now, and tried to bring in numbers. But the thing is, it's all incredibly contingent on promotion. It's incredibly contingent on the advisors, the rollout plan. We did a private beta for about 100 people, then started doing word of mouth invitations where they could apply. Not everyone got in. Some people got in whenever we finally opened it up for everybody else. So it's really tough, and trying to figure out what those numbers look like. At Sales Hacker, whenever I was there, we took it from 6,000 to 30,000 members, and that's insane. But one of the best lessons I learned while I was there was trying to keep up that engagement and that quality in how I could best do that. And so those are really the strategies I'm focused on, is making sure that every person that asks a question gets a response. And that's actually something like I'm really, really proud of, is our response rate is fairly high, which I really like. We've got an 89.1% response rate. And that includes every announcement that I post, every event that we post, everything. So anything that ever gets posted, that is a response rate. And we've got a 60% engagement rate, which is huge for me. And so I will do everything to make sure that our members are getting answers, are getting timely responses. And to me, that is more valuable, but it's where the real trick is, because there's lots of things that you can do that are incredibly manual. Where the real trick is, when you grow, how you can also keep that engagement running parallel with your growth. Because that's what we really see, is people will go crazy on promotion, kind of like the point you were making, but then the engagement doesn't match that. And that's like a very scary spot to be in. And, there's contingencies and obstacles like holidays, or summertime is usually slower, that type of stuff, that you kind of have to take an account of. But it's tough. And where I think it's going to be even more interesting in the upcoming years is trying to understand like what a baseline for industry success is going to look like, because Salesforce can't be it. Nobody has a team of 30 people and $10 million to spend, like, other than Salesforce. So, you can't, that's an impossible standard to reach. It's great in concept and you want to work towards it, but like practically for community teams of 1 to 5 people, we need to do a better job of actually creating what baselines of success look like so that people can understand that. And that's my soapbox for the day. Can I answer your question in a roundabout way?
We're done. Go back to your day.
That's that.
So just kind of pulling on that engagement thread for a second. What do you do within the community to drive that engagement rate, right? Whether it's between you and the community or it's between the community members themselves.
Yeah.
Are you asking certain questions that that the community cares about? Are you presenting certain data or opportunities? What does that look like within your daily workflow that does drive that community or drive that engagement within the community?
Yeah. One of the things that I did to start off with was like, I'm a really big believer in seed questions. And in my Asana board, I have every single week a list of 5 questions that I find from social media, that I find from different like marketing articles, you name it. And just stuff that's kind of like trendy that people might have opinions on. And so that is something whenever we got started was, and this is just kind of like a little psychology and community, is oftentimes whenever you launch with a beta, one of the main reasons why is because you want to help educate them on the best way for them to engage in the community. So whenever you start growing and bringing more members in, then they're actually able to see that behavior and that pattern and help replicate it. So whenever it came to our beta, I started posting seed questions in there with different formats to show kind of like, hey, here's how we ask questions in the community. And then I started seeing members not only engage with those, but then also replicate it. So we're at a kind of cool spot right now where like, I've got a good baseline of the days of the week that are kind of slower. And so then I'll know to put a seed question in there to make some type of an announcement, something around that. And then the days where people are often more engaged in the community. I've also helped set a baseline of like, what are the types of questions or topics that will kind of help fire people up. So obviously ABM versus demand gen, there's always going to be a complicated discussion around that. Attribution, that is always like a big fireball of a question. And so, and then with what LinkedIn's doing with ads and stuff, there's always good conversations around that. One of the
Twitter, what's happened in the past week with Twitter or past 2 weeks,
Yeah. I mean, there's always great discussions. There's always things that people will have an opinion on. Yeah. And then another thing that's been really helpful is I do like onboarding and re-engagement campaigns. And it's been really cool because I had someone message me today, be like, oh, I've just, was going through interviews. I've been a little MIA and unfortunately I didn't get the job. So I'll probably be spending more time in here. And one of the things, I'm trying to remember who, I was just speaking with somebody about this. One of the things to remember with community is that just like in sales, just like in life, there's ebbs and flows. So your engagement will always have ebbs and flows. In sales, you will always have ebbs and flows between successes and losses. In marketing, you'll always have ebbs and flows. And I think one of the biggest things with community is our goal is to make it so that no matter what ebb or flow our members in, no matter what stage of life they're in, there's always something there for them in the community to help minimize the depth of the ebbs and flows. And so with engagement, I look and see what that looks like. And I try and with my re-engagement campaign, like I try and just remind our members that like, I'm here for them and I'm here to support with whatever that looks like. And so it's been ranges from helping people get interviews to just talking about the war in Ukraine. Like I just had this conversation today and asking how we could better support this person. And it's been really cool. It's really cool because then they start opening up and trusting us a little bit more. And then there's ways that we can help build that relationship even more and provide resources that they may not have ever had access to. So all that's boiled down is you've got re-engagement campaigns, you've got behavioral training, but most importantly, I know Jared talks a lot about this, like it's really just about being there for your members and doing the tasks that aren't easy and doing the tasks that take time to make happen, and sometimes aren't even trackable, so I think those are the biggest things of like helping build behaviors and getting members to come back.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So one of that you talk about the how you are driving conversation, right? So
Yeah.
I was just talking with someone about this the other day. So when we opened a revenue circle, it was for our kind of beta, if you want to call it that, was for CMOs and CROs only. And
Yeah.
we hadn't opened it broader to VPs and above. And we just did that. But when it was for CMOs and CROs, and of course I'll continue this, I found something really interesting. And I think this, you'll agree with this in that every community is different. A question of the day type thing, like you said, you
Mhm.
have. And so I asked more serious type questions, right? What are your thoughts on your 2023 marketing budget, or how are you
Yeah.
looking at revenue, or things like that? Then I was in another community that I'm part of,
Mhm.
and we got into a huge endless battle on should pineapple be on pizza, which is always
Mhm.
a huge debate. I took it over to our community, and the next day, that was my question of the day.
Yeah.
And I kind of posted it and took 5 steps backwards, like this is either going to go really well or this is not going to go well at all. I ended up figuring out that our community members, and we'll see now that we're in the process of opening this up to a larger
Yeah.
community, the engagement shot through the roof with light-hearted questions like that.
Mhm. Yep.
And that became how this community has signaled that they want something different.
Mhm.
That maybe by between with their day job, they're spending too much time thinking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe other communities. Have you learned from behaviors that the community tells you? Like, have you thought one thing and then the community responds or gives you feedback in
Yeah.
another way?
Yeah, all the time. So one of the things that we decided whenever we were building and still are building the demand community, is that this community, we wanted it to be so different from anything anyone else has ever built. And one of the ways that we're working on accomplishing that is really making it driven by the members and for the members. And what I mean by that is when we did our beta launch party, we made up a list of core values from some of our favorite communities, and we had our members choose the core values for our community. It gives them sense of ownership, but it's also, there's just a lot of psychology behind it. But at the end of the day, it makes them feel like they have a lot more stake in the success of the community. And since we all chose these values together, we're all more likely to stick to them. So with that in mind, a lot of what we've done is really based off what our members want. So every few months, I'll go into the events channel, or every couple weeks, I guess, and ask like, hey, what type of events are you interested in? I've got a few ideas. Here they are. What are you most excited about? Same thing. We've got an event coming up in December that I'm very excited about. And one of the parts of that event is going to be a masterclass. And so we went into the community and asked, hey, here's what we're thinking. Like, do these topics resonate? What are you most interested in? And so the thing with community and with working with people, especially in a community, is it doesn't matter what I think they want. It doesn't matter what leadership thinks they want. And like, it doesn't matter what our sponsors think they want necessarily. Like, unless it's really what the community members want, they're not going to show up for it. And so like, we saw this at Sales Hacker. There were a lot of times where we had partners who with great intentions had really unique and interesting ideas. But we're like, you're not going to get registrations for that. Nobody's going to sign up for it. And we had a few that were like, we're paying for this. We want to do it this way. And we said, okay, just know, like, we don't recommend this.
Yeah.
And And attendance and registration numbers suffered greatly because of that. And they would come back and say, oh, well, we need to hit this number of registrants. Like, who do you reckon? We're like, we got you. Don't you worry. You need 3,000 registrants. We've got this for you. And we did, and it was amazing. And so a lot of that really taught me like what I think that the community needs sometimes is really just like a tiny fraction of what they probably need. And so it's best for me as someone who's building the community this way to go into the community and say, hey, here's what we're thinking. What do you think? When we launched Women in Marketing a couple of weeks ago, maybe a week and a half ago, we posted in the community in the announcements or general channel. I said, hey, we're thinking of this. What do y'all think? And the support was overwhelming. And so we created that channel and put together some programming. I'm excited to start launching in a few weeks. And once again, that support was, wow, this is amazing. Or, oh, I'm about to be a mom. I'd love to learn how to do this. And, oh, I don't have a place for this. And so it was really cool. And so that's the type of stuff that tells you you're on the right track, but it's not without the opinion of your community. And like, I just want to encourage folks who feel like they're struggling with really planning stuff like this because of leadership. And I want to encourage leaders, like, get out of the way of your community managers to actually do their job. Because so often we see stuff that other communities are doing. We're like, oh, we want to do this, we want to do that. And it's not going to resonate with your community. It probably won't. So you need to give your community managers and head of community like time to make stuff work. But also one of the things though is like you have to be willing to iterate quickly. So it's kind of embarrassing, but I created this program. I thought this was like the most brilliant thing. I had heard a lot of people say, oh, we want something like this. So in my head, I'm like, oh, this is perfect. And it was remote work together. And the idea of it is that so many people are working remotely that we don't have time and we don't have the opportunity to bounce ideas off of people. So what if once a week we met for an hour and it was like open office hours, anyone who wants to comes in with under the understanding that like whatever is said there isn't repeated, so that people can feel comfortable to share like projects and programs and stuff that they're working on. I thought this was like the most brilliant idea. Chatted with a few people. They were like, this is awesome. I did not chat with enough people because whenever I launched it, one, it was so tough trying to get everyone's schedules where they could commit to an hour. So I was like, well, I screwed that up. And then the people I spoke with were like, oh, this is awesome. And they committed to it, but like, that was it. And so it was the same people every single week. And I was just like, we're not doing this. And because I wanted it, the initial goals of it shouldn't have been the driving forces for it. And so once again, it wasn't something that the community really wanted. I'll probably try again in a few months and see, because people come
with
in and
growth.
Yeah, you never know. And so it may be something, and if anyone's here and you want to join, just send me a DM. And if you're in marketing, I'll make it happen for you. But it was such a failure. It was such a cluster because everyone's like, we like the idea, but this isn't going to happen. So
Pump the brakes on it for right now.
Yeah. So there's been plenty of times when I've come up with stuff, but it's always like really good and humbling reminders. And I think the biggest thing is as long as you're taking it as a humbling reminder and not as like, oh, I'm horrible at this because nobody showed up. Like that happens plenty of times. One of my most embarrassing moments was, the school I did my undergrad at in Dallas, they didn't have like an active alumni association. I was so disappointed. And so I didn't know anybody. And I said, oh, I'm going to host an alumni happy hour. And I post on this page, like a handful of people like, oh yeah, this is great. I rent out an upstairs room and nobody showed up. And I was like, I've never felt more like a loser at that moment in my life. So it always is incredibly ironic that like, that's now my job is doing stuff like that because I live with that fear. But it's such a good reminder that like, unless you talk with enough people and you get a diverse sampling group who can actually tell you thoughts on this, and if you create a safe place where people can comfortably say that was really shitty, don't do that again, or like, oh, we love this, thank you, like you're never going to really be able to plan with your community in mind and like have them be the driving force for it. So it's all really, it's the hard, like stupidly embarrassing stuff that you'll always remember and take lessons from. So
Now, I have like 1,001 questions for you because I do this by day 2. And so it's stuff that would frankly help me selfishly. But anyone that's watching, if you see me look down, it's because I'm looking at my phone at the live stream. So I'm going to let the community, people that are joining, their comments and questions, take priority over mine.
Yeah.
So, Ryan Williams said, he's actually said a couple of things, but his first comment was that as a marketer, it's fun to be able to just have authentic conversations in communities without feeling like there's a bias toward the product or by whoever powers the community. He said he understands both use cases on PLG and CLG, but it's nice to have a place to be able to get legitimate feedback on the issues that he's having in this context and get different unbiased perspectives. And Jennifer said she remembers you from Sales Hacker and you were phenomenal, to which Ryan followed up and said that he agrees and that you're superb. Anna, to follow on to that said that you are quite literally the community whisperer. The 2 questions for you, and I think Amelia asked when I'm gonna assume this is during the metrics part, is said, how do you track or create a quote unquote source of truth / clear attributions from leads that are coming from CLG?
So great question. Love attribution. There's a lot of really great tools that'll help. One of the things that we're using right now is a tool called Infinigrow. And so that's helping with like registrations. We're also everything like every member's data points that are collected in HubSpot when they register and they convert to a community member also go into Salesforce. And so we always keep them tagged under community campaign, as well as like in their profile, they'll say if they're a member or not, which is actually a really cool membership growth hack of sorts, because then whenever our sellers are talking with prospects, a really low pressure conversation starter for them is to actually invite them to the demand community. So for me, it's great because it's helping me pseudo organically grow the community without me really like spamming it out into the world, which is really awesome. So those are some things that I kind of look at. I use an awesome tool called Common Room. You got to reach out to Mitch Wilhelm. He's totally going to be upset that I'm saying his name wrong, but he's awesome. Common Room is a really great tool. You definitely need to check them out. And they've been really awesome in helping me with like all the reporting and analytics that we do. In the community, because it is on Slack right now. And so it's been so incredibly helpful just seeing like engagement rate changes. And like I said earlier, as I'm tracking different behavioral patterns within the community, I'm able to see in there what that actually looks like. And so I just know like, okay, traditionally Mondays and Fridays are the slowest days, or Mondays and Tuesdays are the slowest. So what can I do to help supplement that so that the peaks and valleys are a little bit closer together? So those tools have been really awesome.
Anna said, and this was when you were talking about events or different ways to activate the community. She just wanted to know, is it in-person events? And I know you talked about the virtual ones that you're running, but I'll extend her question and say, are you also running in-person events in addition to the virtual ones?
Yeah, we haven't done one yet. It's just, I've been back and forth on doing one in December purely because it's like, by the time we get it together and promotion over Thanksgiving, and then you go into the holiday season and it's just crazy for everyone. Like my husband and I were looking at our calendars and we're like, we have one free weekend at home with like a Harry Potter marathon on our playbook. So we're like, oh crap, how are we gonna make all this work? But as far as in-person events, stay tuned. I'm really hoping to have one in January in Denver. It's really based on like sponsorships for it, as well as where our community members are, and making sure like we're going to the places where the most of them could easily access. So I would love to do a lot more in-person events. I would ideally love to do at least once a quarter in person, because there's just something about that like in-person relationship aspect that's a really cool little special moment that it can be difficult to get online.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we wait for any other questions to come in, I'll say that our plan now that we're opening the community broader,
Yeah.
is to one of my goals for next year, Q1 likely, is to plan an in-person event, right? And I completely agree. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, it doesn't matter how large the community is.
Yeah.
As long as you get it can be a very small subset, and that is my assumption. If it's larger, that's fine. But even if out of, let's call it 500 or 1,000 people, if 10 people come and you get to just go out to a nice dinner,
Yeah.
I think that is a win. It doesn't need to be 100 people in a private room hanging out type thing. If it is, fantastic, but I don't consider a small dinner a failure by any stretch of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, honestly, it's really just dependent on what your goals are for it. And I think where it can be tough with community is getting internal support on doing a small dinner. Cause it's like, well, if we're just doing it to support the community, like there's not really a business outcome geared towards it. And so it's tough because you have to be able to still think about like, how do I support the business and how do I support new business and renewals? But then how do I also hold on to that relationship with my community members and not burn that just to get a deal closed? And so it's a really, really tough balance because one directly affects your job and then one directly affects your morals and ethics on stuff. And so it's like, well, shit, because you want both, right? So it's really tough. And so I think where it's gotten better is a lot. Obviously, I mean, if you're signing up for stuff nowadays, your information is going everywhere, right? Any conference you go to, unless they explicitly say your data will not be sent to sponsors, like it's probably going to sponsors. Same thing with anything you sign up for. So that's where it's like, hopefully people understand that and kind of like give a little grace on that, because oftentimes like we can't do it without sponsors. And so, there's a level on that side. But it's just tough, it's tough trying to keep those relationships where they should be on some of that stuff. And once again, like it's all just about goals. Like no matter how big your community, you could have a community of 300 CEOs and be like thrilled because they're in there every single day posting, they're in there commenting, which if anyone's done an executive community, it's almost darn near impossible to get that type of activity. So like you should be thrilled. Yeah, it is very tough. Even getting like 5 CEOs together for a roundtable is like pulling teeth, plus like $400 bottles of booze. Like it's crazy. And so it's just tough. And where I think people can get really caught up in the community realm is this like comparison game of, oh, it's a similar community or it's focused on similar ICP. And so we have to compare each other, where it's like, that's not the case. There's other communities out there doing kind of similar stuff. And where I think like we really differ is we do protect those relationships, and we do, once again, it's built by members. And so goals on some of that stuff can just be really tricky. So it's tough. It's not for the faint of heart. Don't worry.
No, I agree. Now, one of the things you had mentioned and kind of on the, along the lines of an event was, you mentioned the masterclass, right? And so when you do these events, these virtual events, say the masterclass or things of that nature, do you, to ensure that you have the signups, right? So going on that, assuming that that's your metric is you want attendees. So do you look for a community member that's super engaged and might have that expertise that you want to be that guest? Or are you looking at bringing in a thought leader that's very well respected in the community, in the broader community, in demand gen or what have you, because that person's a draw. So having their name on the ticket of sorts will, make people sign up
bring
because
more
it's
people.
exclusive.
Yeah. So it's tough. It's tough for a few reasons. One, once your community starts gaining a lot more popularity and visibility, you'll have people come out of the woodworks and be like, oh, I'm a sales trainer. I would love to speak about this. This would be really great for your community. And it's like, okay, well, you don't even have an account in my community. So like, how do I even know, that this would be a hit here? And so one of the things that like, I really try to set up is, hey, if you want to speak, awesome. Thank you for volunteering. The community cannot be done without your volunteering help. I appreciate that. I always encourage my speakers to test out ideas in the community. So for example, one of the events we're doing in December, is the speaker had asked, she's like, well, what do you think people are most interested in? I said, well, let's ask them. And so we tested the idea. And so that guided what the conversation is going to look like. And so like, that's something that's really important to me, because then I know I've got at least 30 people that are interested in that topic and are interested in signing up because they engaged in that post. And I can individually go to those people and guarantee those signups. If I have a thought leader that comes to me and says, I would like to do this for your community, I would say, what is the catch? Because oftentimes it's a sales pitch, and that's not going to be tolerated in the community. We've got a few different avenues that we've actually looked at bringing in different platforms to come and do like a Great British Platform bake-off of sorts, where I've got your target ICP. If you would like to come in and do like a no stress demo, no leads are given, and share a little bit of information and people can ask questions, you get 15 minutes, like no BS. Awesome. I'm all about that. But it's just tough. Like there's a lot of, I don't even know the best way to put it, but there's a lot of manipulative people out there that want to just take advantage of your community to try and further their business. And I recognize that, and I appreciate the hustle on some of it. I just think that, at least for our community, we're going to stick to being a little bit more brand agnostic. And like, I have made it very clear to our past speakers who are volunteers, who in my part of my re-engagement campaign is asking if people want to host a roundtable, an AMA, a webinar, a masterclass, you name it. Because it's important for people to learn from practitioners, I believe, not just thought leaders. But I make it very clear that this is not a time to pitch. I want to make sure that no matter who's listening to that session, they have something that they can apply that day, regardless of the product or the tool, regardless of what they have or don't have. And so like, that is incredibly important to me for that stuff. So, hey, if a thought leader wants to come and present something, you just DM me. I'm here for it. But those are my rules when it comes to that stuff.
So and then Anna has a question, which I have a piggyback question off of, but just on the thought leader piece, one of the things that we've done that has turned into being very successful is that we have a thought leader that we've paid, again, the kind of powered by Demandbase piece, right? And he films a video once a week, or a 1-minute video, and we post it once a week. And it's just a question off the top of his head. Right now, it's from a list that we've culled through and made right for the community. He's spent a lot of time in the community, but it's something to do with sales or marketing, right? It's a revenue, naturally a revenue community. And what was funny was when we were going to put this together, he's also, besides being a CX and marketing thought leader, influencer, business owner, all that good stuff, he's a tequila influencer. And he said, hey, listen, I want to give away a bottle of tequila from my personal stash.
Yeah,
for
that's
the
awesome.
best answer. And from the second that we posted the first video, every one of those, they've been the most successful threads we've ever had. And
Yeah.
it's because they're a simple question that people want to get involved, and he's involved in them and things of that nature. But it makes a fun little thing that someone's went on bottled tequila that he chooses, right? It's like, it's been something different. But Anna asked, and like I said, I have a piggybacked question to it. She said, thoughts on building a cab. Like, what are your thoughts on building a cab? My piggyback to that is thoughts on building a community advisory board. And that she might be meaning that by cab. Typically, cab means customer, board. But do you think that a cab, whether you guys already have one within customer marketing or what have you, or do you have an advisory group of sorts, champions group for the community?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually recently took over our company customer advisory board, and we just revamped it and are about to relaunch it. So, I mean, I think cabs are so incredibly pivotal to the success of a company. I think cabs are actually relevant in the community because your customers are your members. So it makes sense to have one. A few caveats with cabs or champions or advocates, whatever you want to call it, a few caveats to consider. One, are you getting a wide enough and diverse enough group of people to participate? And what I mean by that is nothing good really comes out of an echo chamber except feeling proud of yourself and your accomplishments, because the people that are happy and that are volunteering are probably always going to be happy and volunteering with what they're doing. So the people that are unhappy, that dramatically dropped off of engagement, that may have never engaged, those are the ones that you probably want in your community cab, purely because they're going to tell you why did they drop off? Why are they not engaging? And those are oftentimes the numbers that you're wanting to fix. And so that's going to be really helpful. So you've got to be very careful. Look at a very diverse group of people. Two, you've got to be willing to deal with hard shit. So what I mean by this is whenever you have a diverse group of people, you need to set rules going into those discussions of rules of engagement, right? We all have them for our org. We need it for not only our community, but community cabs as well, or champion programs, advocates. Because if you do have a diverse group of people, there are going to be varying opinions. And so you need to have a way to break those ties. If it's an opinion that drives to one action or another, or you need to have different rules on how you actually talk to each other. One of the things in our community that is a core value is we disagree with ideas, not with people. And so that's probably a good core value or rule of engagement to have. And three, don't waste people's time. You don't need to meet every week. If you meet every month, send an agenda out ahead of time. Ask people ahead of time, hey, what is it that you're most interested in talking about? I think where a community cab could be a fun idea and could be really helpful is, you have a diverse group of people. And so you ask hey, what do you think is the top 3 things that keep bringing you back? What are the top 3 things that would remove you from this community? Not because they break rules, but what would be a barrier for them to participate more? And then I also think with that agenda, I guess my 4th thing with it is you need to have a plan of action. So once you get all this feedback, one, what are those people going to get for it? Every so often you get lucky and there's suckers like me, and Anna knows this. I'll raise my hand and help with anything. And so, I don't expect anything in return. And so there's a handful of us out in the world that we just really enjoy helping. I see LinkedIn posts of people saying, my time is so valuable that I can't help anyone anymore. And it's seriously? No, that's my job in this world, is to help others and to be a servant leader. And that's what I'm here for. And so, but not everyone has that perspective. And so being able to reward them in some fashion, understanding what is like a motivation or driver for them to participate in this cab with, and that'll help with your rewards. And then like most importantly is how are you actually going to take what they have to say and put it into action? People will not volunteer and will not help anymore if you're constantly asking for advice, but you're not actually following up and saying, hey, we loved what you had to say. Here's how we implemented it. Or, hey, thank you for sharing this information with us. It actually brought up a lot more questions. And now we're having to have more meetings to figure out how we should place this where, whatever it looks like. Because people, if you're going to ask for their opinion and you don't listen to it, that is one of the most frustrating things. I'm sure all of us can think of a situation that has come up in our mind of like, oh, thank you for asking, but you did nothing with it. So I don't want to help anymore. And so just be cognizant of that is, people want to help. They want to feel like they're contributing. And so finding those ways to reward them is huge for people. So I know caps are great. Champion programs are so many things you can do. But it's just like one of the things that I constantly try to work on at Sales Hacker with our champion program was reminding our members like, hey, if you're at a stage of life where you can't take this on anymore, like no big deal. I'm here for you regardless. If you need to take a few months to yourself, totally cool. So we had people that stepped down and then stepped back up whenever their life kind of got back into a normal swing of things. And so like respecting that and building that trust with them to know like, hey, if you're not able to make it and you've had a pattern of this, like what's going on, have that conversation. So it's really important. But once again, making sure it's valuable and like you have agendas, what you're going to talk about. And if you don't have anything to talk about, don't host the meeting. Like don't do it. Don't waste people's time. So I'm very passionate about that as well.
A lot of meetings could be that way.
Yeah.
Not just community-based ones. But as we wind down, because once again, I have a bunch of questions for you. That's going to be a whole different conversation just between the two of us. Is what do you have coming up next? I know you mentioned a couple events, but for those that are here that are just interested in, okay, I've taken away that you've built up the community with these aspects. Maybe they're in the same spot, maybe they're a member of the community, but what's next for you with the community? Where are your thoughts going into 2023 besides the in-person? What are your thoughts going into next year?
So obviously in person, top thought for me. But the next, I'm a sucker for planning. And a lot of people that are probably on here know, like I plan out far in advance. So we've actually got events planned into March right now, which I'm really excited about. We are planning a half-day Women in Marketing Summit and hopefully doing an in-person aspect of that as well. And just trying to make it like the best marketing community that we can. That's one of our top priorities. And as long as my members keep finding value and keep coming back and bringing their friends, then I'll be a very happy camper. So I know it's like very generic and nothing like crazy, but sometimes it's the little things that can make a huge difference with stuff like that.
It is. Now, as we do wrap up so that we get everyone out on time, where can people find you? If they're interested in joining the community, where can they find the community? All that good stuff, the contact me section of this.
Yeah, absolutely. So absolutely find me on LinkedIn. It's just community-Katie. I know some of you already have, so thank you. And yeah, I don't go on Twitter. I'm just the worst on a lot of social media. So sorry, everyone. I know that's not near as long as you were hoping for, but I'm just really bad on Twitter. So
now, how about the community if they wanted to build?
Oh, if you want to join the community, yeah, if you're in marketing, go to demand.community. That is the entire URL. There's no .com, just demand.community, and you can sign up, or you can just DM me directly and I'll send you that link as well. So
fantastic. Well, thank you. This has been Hopefully very helpful for everyone that's took the time out to join today. It's been helpful to me. Like I said, we have a whole nother conversation you don't know about happening on the side, but I do appreciate it. Thank you, like I said, for everyone that took the time out to join today. And this time next week, we have a fun conversation coming up, which you guys will learn all about later. So take care. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate y'all.
Okay. Bye.